Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us today to celebrate the publication of Lewis Meyers' Field Notes of a Flaneur. I'm Doré Watson. The first order of business is a huge thanks to Matt Donovan, director of the Boutelle-Day Poetry Center here at Smith, for agreeing to host this event, and to Jen Blackburn for making it seem as though I'm the host when actually she's behind the scenes making it happen, because I was going to not be able to do that. I want to first show the book. This is the beautiful book that we have. There's going to be I think there is or going to be a link in the chat for how to order it. Before our incredible lineup of poems reads from this amazing book, whose author died in 2020, we thought it would be interesting to hear the extraordinary story for you about how this book happened. Diana Cheechens Myers emailed me in January 2022, searching for someone to look at a fat parcel of Lewis's poems to advise her about how it might become a book. I agreed to look, expecting that without the poet, she would probably need to self-publish it. But once I began reading, I just couldn't stop. Here was a unique voice, altogether original, a dark, deep, delightful mind, full of moral reflections, with a deep skepticism of innocence and a wonderful sense of humor. So, with no idea how we might interest a publisher, we set ourselves first to the task of sending poems to journals, choosing which poems to include in a manuscript, and ordering them. And stellar journals began getting them out into the world, including Poetry Northwest, 5 Points, Hudson Review, Massachusetts Review, Plume, and Paris Review. Yes, Paris Review. But how would we appeal to publishers? 2 poet friends were key to what comes next. Barbara Raz, my lifetime sister poet, who's here today, as you can see, suggested gathering a team of prominent poets who might be willing to stand behind it on publication. So I sent a fat batch of Lewis's work to poet friends, including today's readers: Anne-Marie Macari, who's actually not here yet, but we hope she'll join us, Barbara Raz, Chase Twichell, Christopher Merrill, Eleanor Wilner, Kevin Prufer, and Marianne Boruch. I also sent it to Araceli Skirmay, Carolyn Forche, Tim Siebels, Alicia Ostreicher, Cole Swenson, Dana Levin, and those people couldn't be here today, but also offered, yes, to use their names in support as we looked for a publisher. As a longtime fan of Kevin Prufer's terrific Unsung Masters series, which publishes volumes by unjustly neglected or out-of-print poets and features Zoom presentations of their work, I asked him for advice, and he became a crucial advisor all along the way. And he even suggested that we borrow their tagline for the Zoom: "A poet you don't know, introduced by poets you love." Generous, generous. Joy of joys, John Thompson had the good taste and the foresight to choose Field Notes of a Flaneur as winner of the New Measure Poetry Prize at Free Verse Editions, and is also here with us today. Thank you, John. Diana Myers and I are deeply grateful for all the energy and encouragement from everyone who helped us get here. And now, before we finally get into the poems, I've asked Diana to say hello and share a particularly lovely and telling backstory about our poet today, Lewis.
Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for being here. I'd like to add something personal that's pertinent to our reading this evening and that I especially loved about Lewis. He was a terrific reader. I'm talking about reading out loud. Early in our marriage, over the course of 6 summers at a cottage in the woods in Vermont, he read all of In Search of Lost Time to me in the evenings. He references reading the first volume, Swan's Way, in a poem called In Country, which Barbara Ross will be reading for you shortly. Lewis was still reading to me in the summer of 2020, this time stories by F. Scott Fitzgerald. For New Yorkers, the summer of 2020 was a time when we were all going nuts with fear and enforced isolation during COVID. Lewis eased my distress by giving me the pleasure of hearing great literature read with his customary sensitivity and verve. It would be so wonderful if he could read his poems for you. But happily, an extraordinary lineup of poets you love, thank you, Kevin Prufer, is here to read on his behalf. Anne-Marie Macari, Barbara Ross, Chase Twichell, Christopher Merrill, Eleanor Wilner, John Thompson, Kevin Prufer, Marianne Boruch, and Ellen Doré Watson. Heartfelt thanks to each of you. And of course, special thanks to Ellen. Ellen has been my mainstay throughout our multi-year effort to bring Lewis's legacy to the poetry reading public. Without her guidance and advocacy, neither Lewis's posthumous journal publications nor field notes of a Flaneur could have happened. Profound gratitude, Ellen. And now back to you.
It's been wonderful to work with you, and now I have a new friend, so it's wonderful. We're as eager as all of you are to get to the poem, so I'm going to keep my intros of everyone who have impressively long lists of accolades and publications to a quick sentence or two. And I'm going to read Anne Marie's, even though she's not here, and I'm going to read the poems that she was about to read because she was important to have in this list. Anne Marie's new collection, American, manages to be both searingly relevant and heartfully personal, a book full of love and loss. I can tell you that reading it straight through on a train was an intensely beautiful and devastating experience. And Anne Marie, here are the poems that she chose. First one is The Only. Struggling out of the stroller, using his elbows, the little primitive cannot be quieted or consoled. Something is lost or missing from his required list. What is it? Toy or weapon, whatever he had and now does not have. The mother, speaking to the back of his head, wheeling him toward his majority, says they'll get another one. But the first one is the dear one. Can this day be replaced? Can his mother's voice from above be? There are no other ones, yet he can't tell her the blunt truth, and so continues as before. He'll be less eruptive after. In the evenings sometimes, sitting alone, he'll lower the book he's been reading and surprise himself with longing for what nothing's ever made up for. Not love, not France, not glass houses, and try to remember what it was. Second poem is called Blindness. It's the first one in the book. The blind girl hears the stone wall her dog has marched her up to. She stands forgiven for thinking stones are air. Both stand there, facing the situation as quietly as the stone blocks did when first joined. She smiles at them, not to offend. On the far side, the St. Mark's dead, bridling at pavement they wish was grass, like us had rushes of feeling once. But they're no help at all now. Shouldn't someone who has a heart use his head and take a hand to help? Yet girl and dog stare in pure Egyptian profile, nevertheless, and not giving offense. It's just as if they were meant to be here, as if the afternoon had been listening for them, the shade trees cutting it short with the breeze. People out in force for a little air began to wonder where faith should lie, finding a blind girl and her dog standing as if enchanted, as if they gazed at themselves in a mirror where only the two of them were. And one more. The Climate of Fascism. It's one a little bit relevant these days. The Climate of Fascism. The dog that will bite, ranging the stony yard, chimes in when the wind joins the chain link fence. On the high hill, the wind is the air in crisis, making the light a real headache. The positive immune to aspirin or reason. In the house, tossed negligently on a desk, coins of the realm display the strong man's profile. Can't we turn this around? Grandmother, the last reader, turning the page back to her child girlhood. Blurred blue flowers dot the inside lip of her teacup. But this day or that, a waste pipe runs through the preserved forest into the swimmer's lake. And hidden in tough hedges, vipers like tire strips slip out from the grinding heel and strike. But don't say you weren't warned by the one pickled in a pharmacy window or afloat in sleep there, waiting. Guess I need to leave that on to introduce the next person. Okay, brilliant poet and editor and the aforementioned best friend Barbara Raz. His most recent gift to readers is You Can't Have It All, a gorgeous rendition of her poem by that title with stunning art by Terrell James. It's a gorgeous little gift for someone you know, maybe mother. And I have to say, it also highlights the solace readily available. Barbara. You're not unmuted yet, Barbara.
Here I go. I had all the poems up and now they're not here, but don't worry, they will appear. So it's really a pleasure to be reading with so many illustrious poets, some of whom I would say, probably most of whom I'm fortunate to call friends. And it's a joy to give life in part, in whatever part we can give, to Lewis Meyers' incredible work. So, why the poems were on my computer, on the desktop, and now they're gone. So, you're going to have to give me a moment to screw around with my computer and find them again.
Do you want me to resend them to you quickly?
Sure, that'd be great.
Mhm.
Thank you, Diana.
Yeah, we're trying.
There were so many emails, and I said, "Okay, I'm going to get ready because I don't want to. I don't want to hold anything up." Well, I'll start by saying that the first poem I'm going to read, "In Country," does reference the beautiful experience of reading Proust aloud to Diana, and it references other people in the neighborhood. Both the poem is both celebratory and somewhat it has trenchant moments, but I think on the whole, it is a celebratory poem. And here it is. Thank you, Diana. It's called In Country. The sun has come to power. Could it ever overstay its welcome? But it may need to dissolve an aspirin or two on earth in a piercing stream. Before the day is over at dusk, the heavy drinker has fallen flat on his face in his own garden, tisk-tisking in the grass, recriminatory notes under the hoods of trees. Yet a brown dog named However has escaped its chain and ranges free. He wants to take a raccoon by the hand. Night now, bats rob the cradle. Drops smaller than a needle's point tap against a house's window panes. Safe inside, in bed, a man reads Proust aloud to a woman until they sleep. but at the bottom of the road, dislike of each other pushes another couple apart. And finally, sorry, this is computer glitching. But at the bottom of the road, dislike of each other pushes another couple apart and finally fells the remaining elm. Will the sun change them back? It will not. The two following Swan's Way scent the unfolding river, the unfolding flower of the sun, and are happy they're no one else. The next poem is What is in the Water. And here is a moment where Lewis Meyers is a little bit more serious and ringing the gong of dread through the poem, which bemoans what is, in fact, in the water. What is in the water? I read the language they use, those words dropped without a splash into the water of life that we have to drink, that we drink to live. Predator, reaper, hellfire, the metal words. And we make tea with them. We add them to soup. We shower and soap and wash the children in them, these remote lakes of fire for the others. And we hose down the family car with them and water the front lawn and our green plants with them, with these invisible additives. And if we do need to stomach them, we couldn't imagine them to save our lives, while Aquavita envelopes others in flames, and we continue using cups, dippers, glasses. When we turn to this next poem, we see Lewis again in his delightful and delighting celebration of something as sweet and admirable as believing in angels. The reason to believe in angels who are beyond belief is not because they don't know what it is to be chilled to the bone. They don't know and run naked when one can see them through the trees, but it's to apprehend what they would if they existed, doing so most easily probably in winter, a still season when everything stops to pose for its photograph. As for us, we waddle around in the cold, our nudes buried in thicknesses of feathers, and we carry a comb for light-heartedness, also perhaps an orange, balled in flimsy paper, to eat on a dark afternoon. Angels would find it touching that we think we're still here. They would be distantly amused, yet eventually their lips would draw in like dried flowers. They'd clap their hands to their ears as we make noises showing we're happy, which is the final reason to believe in angels.
Thank you, Barbara. And we're so glad that Anne Marie managed to get here. Unforeseen circumstances made her a little bit late, but since I read the poems, I've asked her if she would please say a few things about them, and she's going to do that.
Okay, and I apologize for being late and missing my spot. The first thing I want to say is that in reading all of these poems, I just kept thinking, this is a person I wish I had known, that there's just a dear and soulful person behind these poems. And, this first poem I was going to read, Blindness, just so much beauty and compassion. This girl who's blind and the dog facing the wall and what he makes of it, and how he elevates them into and takes them into this place of beauty, even though it's a kind of a frightening and sad scene of a blind girl being led by a dog, and they're kind of stuck. They get in front of a wall and don't know where to go. And he always leads to these moments at the end of the poems, finding a blind girl and her dog standing as if enchanted, as if they gazed at themselves in a mirror where only the two of them were. And he just has a way of showing the inner life in such a delicate and tender way. And it's the same thing with the poem The Only, where this child can't, has lost something. What is it? We don't know. We can't find it. And like all mothers, we say, we'll get we'll get a new one. Don't worry. And then the adult, lowering the book he's been reading and surprise himself with longing for what nothing's ever made up for. Not love, not France, not glass houses, and try to remember what it was. And we all know that feeling. I mean, he just captures something where, there's something we're longing for, but we don't even know what it is. And I think that's just such a deeply human emotion. And I'll let you go on, and I apologize again for being late.
Thank you, Anne Marie. I'm glad we had your words. That was wonderful. The next poet is Chase Twichell. Chase Twichell's ninth collection, The World It Was, is forthcoming from Copper Canyon in fall 2026. And given her past books, I personally cannot wait to have it in my hands.
Thank you. Reading the poems of Lewis Meyers for the first time made me think about what it means to be original. I think too often originality is taken to mean saying things that have never before been said. And in today's poetry, we often see non sequiturs, odd splices of words, nonsensical but emotionally associative phrasings that masquerade as originality. But I think genuine originality is something else. In Meyers' poems, it takes the form of going back to the origins of whatever it is he's investigating and using that as a starting point. Each poem chooses something as its origin and then moves forward into the not yet known. We see the mind moving from observation to image to memory through tonal variations, but the connections are always overt, however subtle they are. We see the poet discovering each swerve of attention, each reflex, so that each poem has a discernible spine and is never just a miscellany of strung together phrasings. Thus, the poems take fresh and surprising shapes, even though they are also always coherent. Their linguistic playfulness belies their seriousness and directness. I think their wildness is a necessary wildness, and I find them exhilarating. So I'm going to read 3 of them. The first one is Advent. The white moth, down on its luck in the hotel corridor, is a petty concern, or doesn't even get under the wire for anybody booted, crossing the threshold of the breakfast room. Wings outspread as if in welcome, the moth holds its breath, but it's got thorax written all over it. So is anatomy fate? A back window giving on the garden gave it a choice. And don't think the moth is a soul hankering to rejoin the living. The moth has a body and is still all aflutter in life, just like you, O child of fortune. I should have also said that he makes me laugh frequently. Another room. The thing about space in paintings is you can't step into it to cough or kiss and cut down an alley between the monuments. Particularly that whiplash limit sends you reeling in Peter de Hooch's paintings where the door is always open. In another room, open, where the door is always open to another room, another chance in life. But you can't go through that door. You may make out a dresser's edge in the pointless light. There can be, hidden from view, bed and bedspread and mirror, and a woman showing her teeth as she bites a thread in two, mending all. That's as may be. The dream consoles you, but at your peril, and in place of your soul's desire for the air to reveal to you where it bends so you can turn an invisible corner into something else and see what gives there. See past seeing. It's amazing how the last lines just seem inevitable in these poems. That's hard to do. Milkweed diet. In the 6th chapter, God sets the monarch butterfly the task of cracking a person's lifeline with its 2 wings when it's time. In his prayer book, the old man reads the blessing for milkweed, every sterling thread of which is essential to the monarch's diet, and his faith is tested. He'd starve the insect to go on living endless hours, endless days. Didn't the widows say he looked 60? In his book, birds snap butterflies out of the air, but one flutter makes a stir and changes everything. Slightly, yet a little is enough for God to turn his face from him. The butterflies have started eating. They're eating. It's over.
Ellen, I think you need to unmute. Hey, Ellen, can you
Okay,
unmute?
okay, sorry. I was having trouble. Thank you, Chase. Christopher Merrill, longtime director of Iowa's International Writing Program, has been to more countries than all of us on this Zoom put together and has brought untold numbers of U.S. and international writers together, both here and abroad. His most recent book, Flares, I mixed this up. What I meant to say this at the end. His most recent book, Flares, is described as, quote, signals in the night illuminating the hidden corners of our time here on Earth. Order it. Christopher.
Thank you, Ellen, and thank you all for joining us tonight. I can't tell you how excited I was to receive this book and have the chance to read it as I did straight through. And one of the things that stayed with me is the beautiful description of him saying that Lewis Meyers had lived a capacious life, dedicated to art, music, teaching, and politics, but his true love was poetry. I love that word capacious because this book is a capacious experience for the readers. He was, as Chase wisely pointed out, somebody who can make us laugh on the page, but he also knows how to wring lots of meaning out of the seemingly smallest things in our. Oh, somehow or other I muted myself. The first poem I'm going to read is titled "The Comeback," and it comes from a memory from his childhood. Not quite a Proustian memory, but riveting all the same. Then the sparrow I killed came back to me, but as big as a house, as in Hieronymus Bosch. Irresistibly, it crushed me out of the picture. Who deserves more for thirsting for blood? This is that sparrow that fell so hard for me, fell at my feet, while I slowly lowered the barrel of my Red Ryder air rifle. Forgive me, I'd think to say, if continuing in that vein wouldn't invite so many. I wrapped him up tight in a newspaper cerements, said, keep quiet about this. but in the guilty aftermath returned to unbind his heart from his blood spot. He flew. Life since is penitence. Why kill a person? A sparrow alone may be the end of everything. For all who believe or don't, they're safe from the smother of an expanding breast. And what I love about that is there's so many delicious surprises along the way in that poem. Not to mention the sheer beauty, the music of the phrasing. Ellen read the first poem, Blindness, in the book, and it's interesting that the next poem I'm going to read is the poem that follows, and it is titled Happiness, which makes us think about what connections there are, what juxtapositions there might be between our own forms of blindness and our own happiness. On the coffin-sized black porch, high above the ground, where anyone worth his salt pursued his heart's desire, I didn't know what to do and asked my mother that. I was 7. It was August, the capital's glandular month. It came in with morning glories. Between its teeth were darting eyes. We were in a natural sweat. My health took the heat off, but not Baudelaire's boredom, which I wasn't aware I had. Mother couldn't allay it, but I thought it must be happiness, the word on everyone's lips just before the end of the world. And I stood on the screened porch, looking in on the kitchen, while Mother made lunch, and Tosca played on the radio, bored to tears of happiness, or happily sweating with boredom. And the last poem I'm going to read is titled, The Moon is Bourgeois. The moon is full of itself and goes from triumph to triumph, rising in the estimation of every celebrity hunter. Its glory is fleeting. For a whole hour, it can't exceed the limit of my window, and the earth never. Yet it shrugs that off as a necessary conciliation of what lies beyond it. Ultimately, it's bourgeois, like a Vatic poet in residence. Last evening, it passed over a green field lit by more than itself. The way things stacked up there, the players were in hell, the crowd in heaven. That was all right, with the moon, if it was all right with them. It wasn't so high and mighty. All it really wanted, if it came down to it, was to stay in town, maybe start a business, marry, join the citizens in their daily life, even become, in time, a leading light.
Thank you, Chris. Eleanor Wilner, a consummate poet and teacher, and currently a chancellor of the Academy of American Poets, and hilariously funny, is hands down the most modest writer on the planet.
I'm trying. Am I unmuted? Yes? Oh, good. Okay. I'm sorry. No, I don't think I'm the most modest, maybe the most modest living poet, but I would nominate Lewis Meyers because the lack of ego in these poems is one of its great powers of imagination. In this first poem I'm going to read, a sensitive, erotic moment is vividly and lovingly recalled, and it all takes place in one short stanza, it's a show and tell, between the cup and the lip. Demonstration. Nostalgia. It kept my tea warm and fuming, nostalgia. Even as I went down the field to pick wild strawberries with my nose to the ground and then climbed back up again and raised the cup to my lips, like the place between her thighs, after kissing their insides, shaking for what came next that they remembered from before. This next evocative poem, this moves through its 4 quatrains. It moves, how shall I say it? Well, it brings us to the final question as it moves through experience, like a trap door at the end that drops us. We had felt that it was solid ground. I think that's what Chase called the not yet known. The lion house, every exhalation, every shifting muscle, every paw fall, the pad depressing, raised the odor of the lion house. It was the signature odor of the zoo. And now to come on that odor again, not in a park of pits and caves, but thrown off by an encampment, heaving with men who've made a home away from home. One day a man had to go there. And now that he knows himself no longer, he doesn't know it either. You heard him shouting with the rest. You went on after that. You went on, and you had to ask yourself what you'd gotten used to, like the lion house in your childhood. This last poem I'll read is titled Fathers. It's a small miracle of a poem, to me anyway. I've waited so long to find this poem. As it takes on the aborted sacrifice of Abraham and Isaac, the poem reveals, with Lewis Meyers' characteristic light touch on heavy subjects, and the chutzpah to speak for God, the home truth that the voice we hear is the voice we're listening for. Fathers. God shook his head over a father so suspiciously willing to kill the son and end a line designed to break out like seedlings from the pod. So what if a voice ripped the night in two like paper? It might have been the wind, not him. Out of contempt, he sent his servant to wave the heavy cleaver away. We prefer the father, he said, who has let himself be pushed around by his grandchildren as they splash on him in an inflatable wading pool, despite the blade, their age, hanging over his head.
Thank you, Eleanor. Editor of Free Verse Editions and a wonderful poet himself, John Thompson his most recent collection, is Distances. He's our hero. Without him, we might not be here.
Well, thank you so much, Ellen, and thank you for championing his work. It's hard to think that it would have come to the attention of the world without a kind of advocacy that you've offered. So that's a real poetic generosity. I first came across Lewis's work in a Paris Review poem titled Summer Letters, which was sent to my inbox. It stunned me. I was so taken by it, I printed it out, reread it many times, and meant to look up who this Lewis Meyers character was, but forgot. And then 8 or 9 months later or so, I was astonished to see a manuscript by the very same mysterious Lewis Meyers submitted to Free Verse Editions, which I edit for publication. The collection, Field Notes of Flaneur, is, as many people have already attested this evening, a real rarity. A few things that struck me then and now about it. First of all, the great sense of style of his poetry. It's a very stylish, very self-possessed poetry. In that regard, to me, it sort of reminds me of some of Wallace Stevens' poetry, which is extremely stylish. The next thing that struck me about the collection was this intensity of scene that I often find in Lewis's poetry. Sort of like Emily Dickinson, sort of like William Carlos Williams, this capacity to just zero in on telling details. I'd also point out that he's a brilliant fabricator of metaphors and images, and very original. But beyond all of his technical brilliance, maybe one of his most winning qualities, to me at any rate, is the peculiar and moving tonal complexity of his poetry, where wit and poignancy often go hand in hand. So the first poem I'm going to read happily is this poem, Summer Letters, which was my introduction to his poetry. So Summer Letters could be said to be about the small non-events that make up a lazy summer day. Or maybe it's about letters, poetry's capacity for imagining the world in language. Or maybe it's a reflection on mortality, and maybe much else. But here it is. Tree, the sun's brainchild. The caterpillars are crawling to heaven. The porcupine ate the delectable car tire. Wind bends the tree. I couldn't do that. The black raspberry's passion for a drop of sunlight. While I wrote, a butterfly, that critic, rode my wrist. Brown velvet gown trimmed in yellow with blue polka dots. A bird squeezed itself through the air. A bird swallowed space and then exhaled it. Rain, the saplings, it skins them alive. A shotgun echoes despairingly from the valley. Coral mushrooms. Queen Anne's lace sweetens wild carrot breath. The earth's rigid plates drift below the daisy. Backgammon on grass, losing every game to ants. The sun and clouds playing honeymoon bridge. Creams and lotions, brushes to apply the lesson. Like the black lily that comes up year after year, despite the hostility of the gardener. To sleep like an opera star, still singing. Deplorably rocky meadows. Toadflax, orange and yellow, opposed to black's pure repulsion. The cows' rustling mouths, but God will scatter their teeth. The light is too dark for colors to help. The grape is squashed in bitter prejudice. Turtlehead, Indian pipe, purple bergamot, heel-all, bull thistle. The whitewashed wood snaps in exasperation. Pearly everlasting is my girl. The second poem I'm going to read today is simply entitled Ubeda. I never knew where Ubeda was, but it's a mid-sized city in southern Spain. And the point of departure for this sonnet is the witnessing of a funeral procession. And the poem then uses the locale of Ubeda to reflect upon desire, which seems to be one of Lewis's key subjects. I want the motorcade to vanish into more than the end of the street. I want it to be broken into fragments by the sun. I want it to have been made entirely of hearses. The select passenger's head lies on a silk cushion. His nose sticks up like a dripless candle. But release me from wanting anything. Yet why be ashamed to say where your heart is? Put me down among the January roses where a man on a bicycle rounds the corner to enter the street of the moon and the sun in Ubeda. He rides into the wakening plaza and there dismounts. The statue of the blind angel of innocence looks at him. Children are shouting as the sun walks toward the sundial. The last poem is titled Glazier. Glazier, of course, is a glass tradesman. And it's a poem, I think, that meditates, like a lot of Lewis's poems, on seen and not seen and on perspective. Glazier. The glazier's men bear away a wood-framed, sail-sized pane of the sky after a rainstorm. Some will look at it, others through. But tilt now and let in cars and sudden buildings, ruining the vision, along with lampposts and people. And how badly it would reflect on us should one of this two-man crew stumble into darkness. He won't. In the light of day, we see how it's possible to use muscle to achieve balance within reason, though clouds hold religiously to their position above, and the desired clarity of mind is stricken by some obstreperous body. So the heavens pass on our level, filling the glass in the hands of men who hold on. They share its transparence. When the sun breaks into the picture the pane makes without cracking it. Thank you all.
Thank you, John. Aside from being one of the most generous humans I know, Kevin Prufer is published by Copper Canyon, currently serves as the 2026 Poet Laureate of Texas, and has both a new poetry collection and a new novel coming out in 2029. P.S. Do yourself a favor and check out the Unsung Masters. There's a whole lot of them on the web to be visited.
Thanks, Ellen. Yeah, I love these poems too. I was thinking about what John just said about zeroing in on telling the tales, which was almost word for word something that I'd made a note of too. That sort of drilling in, but also this wonderful sense I get in these poems of a speaker who's at once plain spoken and rewards revisiting, that is plain spoken and complex at the same time. It's a difficult trick, and I love how he does it. But I also wanted to just throw some light on Ellen Doré Watson here for putting this all together and for helping all of us come together and use the voices that we have to, sing about a poet who can't do it for himself right now. I just think that's really important work, and I love that you did that, Ellen. So I'm just going to read three little poems. The first is called To Be. Cinders flee the banks of the old fall river line. Leaves on the bushes are taken aback, like the man who rode the rails. He feels rushed, settling in on his mattress, the 1,000 leaves, the bed he made and must sleep in. It's ample and thin, and it's night. Turned turtle, his mind wanders, his body laments, his house is a pure hypothesis, its walls an empty parenthesis. But on all sides, the blue presses in between the trees like a curtain, like a condolence, brown on no wind into what dream? In the dream, his brothers smother him with affection under their wing, proclaim him, look, the dreamer cometh, but it's morning. He's up and about, out somewhere, but he'll be back, treading down the ant's mansion, pulling the sky closed behind him, as troublesome to himself as ever. Ants. A-N-T-S, not like aunts, ants. The good times are over, said the ant to itself. It couldn't see as far as the crushed grass ahead, but it felt the impact of a fine-grayed shadow there was no way out of, and so it proved. The ant gave up its territory. The ant's name has been lost, and no one claimed the body for burial and memorial. The stamping man, however, went on to better things before he too fell underfoot. The moral is true, but banal, and true because it is banal. But the reader shuts his book. He finds it a place on the shelf where he won't have to see it again. Am I supposed to be an ant? He asks. The sisters of dew hear him all the way outside on the lawn. But quietism is their métier. Rather than comment, they send their condolences inaudibly, and he puts on his pajamas. The last poem I'm going to read is called Still Life and Motion. Through this bus window tonight, the words apples and onions appear and remind me of the things themselves, but not in Cézanne's Nature Morte. There, the real leaves the actual behind, yet is all the more real for that. I saw that happen also on a bus in a worse time. Night's biting rejoinders had won me over to its position. Then a glass door lit in a blank wall, a frame for women who swam in lanes. Their white arms flashed against the blue. Soundlessly, they moved past as I moved with them, and I was gone before they reversed. But the blue pool consoled my exhaustion and cooled. the fever risen from losing the real in words that were so far from the actual. The swimmers in maillot and black bathing caps, though separated from me by window beyond window and by the disappearances of motion, were there in the flesh and were beautiful, which is the most real. Thank you.
Thank you for everything, Kevin. I love that the terrific poet Marianne Boruch, Guggenheim and Bellagio Fellow, Fulbright Scholar, and founder of the Purdue University MFA program, begins the bio info she sent us with, Marianne Boruch has devoted years to this madness. Thank you, Marianne, and go. You're not unmuted yet, though.
You hear me now? Okay, great. Sorry. Hi everyone. So great to see old friends and to be gathered here to really love Lewis's work. Thank you, Ellen. Thank you, Diana, for bringing him to us. Roughness. Backing up a little to let the bus pull in, I leaned one hand against the tree trunk for balance. It was stable. It was an upper Fifth Avenue tree, preserved to comfort the eyes of the rich in the windows across the street. But that isn't the tack I wanted to take. The uneven bark rubbed my palm, and I felt the way exiles do after returning to their native country. I felt I'd come back, after long absence, to the roughness of things. The traveler. Finding a crease in the wall joining two buildings, he turns his back to the world to piss in the middle of Wednesday. There is no picnic for the traveler, or for anyone who has no place to go in his singularity. But you've been around. You know how it is. When one's no one, when there's no one. So this is for you. In kindergarten, bad actors had to sit on their hands. Use that as a memory. It doesn't matter if it's not yours. It can ease the tension you feel. It's so tender. And it can move you to a place inside your head, a phrase no longer in vogue, but still providing shelter when it rains. And listen, once I saw a nice German family playing hide and seek in the Berlin Holocaust Memorial's Forest of Stones. These people had a house and possessions. Shake off the moment. Distance is yours. Distance is yours, I'm afraid, but you've darkened the earth. In the kitchen. Let's say there's a God and he has a kitchen. He invites you into it. He opens every drawer and takes out one cooking utensil after another. Look, he says, demonstrating each of them, how this one works, and that one. They grind, flatten, slice, mix, pound. Then he comes to the grater. He says, notice the unique refinement each side has to offer. He leaves it at that, but looks at you expectantly, hoping you'll comment. Unfortunately, the best you can do is to remember how it felt to skin your knees as a child. What to love in a Meyers poem? It connects seemingly random dots. It assembles the small and the sweeping. It turns its back to the world for the most private piss in public. No place to go except this poet's and our own singularity. The earth goes dark as history, while families frolic above it. Past tense? No, what I hear is eternal present, that ancient all-at-oneness. Playful unto dead serious, note the God's eye view of a human kitchen defined by a quiet domestic violence. Grind, flatten, slice, mix, pound, and yes, the greater. Kid pain and proud embarrassments. What about that? God seems seriously curious. Skin knees, the poet feels after coming up with nothing. Haunted poems mean you disappear into an image and get remade. In the ruthless, wealthy city, lean against the real thing for balance. A tree, as a bus misses you by inches. Savor the abruptness of its bark. Same as, that raw flash inside an exile returned to his native country after years. Poems are rarely this sane, this strange and familiar. Thank you, Lewis, wherever you are.
Thank you, Marianne. I want to remind people to check the chat for further bios, fuller bios also in the chapbook, and a link to Saint Flaneur to buy it from Free Verse. And I also want you to know this reading is being recorded and will be available afterwards to share with others so that you can hear about that. Now we're going to do something a little bit unusual. We're going to read this longer poem called Mercury. And this is a singular opportunity for us to join together a poem that we thought would be fun and interesting to put out into the air in our different voices in succession. Each one of us will read a section, and then afterwards, I'll read one last poem to close the evening. First reader is Marianne, and we're not going to announce the names. We'll just go through and read the poem without interruption.
Mercury. The way Bach's last fugue stops is the way you want to, with everything going just fine up to then. The fox picked off the kittens one by one. The mother the mother cat, missing them, mewed, searched, came up empty, forgot them. Inadequately stained leaves of the tea plant float in a cup to remind me that nothing should go down too easily. The cashier tells me she put sugar cookies in her microwave, but I can't believe this is a sexual invitation. She killed the porcupine eating her car tires with the spade she later used to bury it. Her moral position was complex. Her red hair was so red, it had obviously been indoctrinated with the need to be red.
She had gone, and look at the way my sock is rumpled. Did it ever have any elastic to lose? It did, if I did. You can't fight your whole life, Stanley says to the concessionaire, who tells him that is wisdom. We owe everything to the past. My aunt bought my mother a nightgown for her honeymoon. Death will disappoint you like your wife. She calls long distance. You answer joyfully. She says, turn the radio down. The fern branch cut into the handle of the saw purely as decoration helps me to get a grip. Wheeling over the transfer station, exercising their right to criticize, the crows say what a dump it is.
The horse lifts one foot fastidiously from the current flowing under him and over him and through him. Lying awake in the dark this morning, I think of a star that's far away and pulling even farther away from me. The noise I make running back upstairs for an umbrella gives the walls time before I burst in to pull themselves together. A man carrying a danger sign is someone to look out for and be careful of. We didn't believe he would kill himself because he had never done anything like that before, although there's a first time for everything. Fashion models and recent corpses stare at each other in disbelief from the newspaper's facing pages.
Like an artist who's ahead of his time, the beggar hisses in exasperation when his work goes unappreciated. The tide withdraws. The naked ground anxiously talks about its illness, whether it will come back. The bee that stung me came off the back of a plate in the Berlin Porcelain Museum to say, nature beats culture. Nobody can see me until I put on my glasses. Thursday is a thirsty day, says the child, who doesn't know to leave well enough alone. The intellectual's severed head advises the executioner to read his books. He does, but the pages he licks his fingertip to turn are poisoned.
The armored car driver had to slam his door twice before it stayed shut. Such things give me pause. The wind raised by passing cars is full of every imaginable filth and stirs the daylilies. A woman lying with her legs raised invites comparison. That girl in her sundress will grow out of the interrogative mode and become the bearded lady. Are you the sparrow found in Gazzoli, found as usual in a lower corner, looking for a crumb off canvas? This woman is her own project. She indents the air, which then talks in paragraphs to praise her.
Chase, you need to unmute.
There, sorry. The gold sprinkles on the Greek vases need the discarded cigar's gold band to complete the history of mannerism. Listening to the silver paper crinkle while laughing over sugar candy made the day more than bearable. Drinking grape soda from a bottle held up against a purple sunset is decadent as those things go. Thieves break into a neon factory and steal mercury to dip their cigarettes in so that the god will be imminent. To wake with the pillows on the floor and leaves inside the bedroom door and your foot, like a statue's, clearly broken. I'm just thinking of the sky, the faces it makes, its silence that is tired of my voice.
Barbara, can you unmute?
You're muted.
Still muted.
You having trouble finding the poem? Do you want us to just go on and read it, or do you want to find it?
No,
Oh,
somebody else read it.
Okay, I'll read your part. Nurses unnerve me, smoking cools on the hospital steps. When the doctor approaches the bedside, the nurses fall back and huddle together, gossiping like village wives. He pointed to his burial ground as we drove by in the rain. Turning too late, I read the sign, Norman's Farm Mart. You could pick up that bare tree in your hand. It seems so close and so small, and comb your hair with it. I watched a woman kissing a man in the street. When their faces parted, she smiled all over hers. She had to stand on tiptoe to reach his lips. I like what happens to the muscles in your face and to your eyes as well as you walk along the street eating an apple.
I want to be forgiven at 4 a.m. Forgiven like the green plant on the table when it's still too dark to see it for what it is. Low murmurs, muted piano, the screened porch, a summer evening. Who would want to complete these sentences? It must have been past 3. A bird in the uncut grass removed its shadow. The true self emerged. The rain is trying to get to the sea, but it keeps being thrown back on rivers and streams and swampy grasslands. The cicadas call out numbers to the crickets who chant the alphabet back at them. The scarlet tanager in the plum tree is too much to take, though a bare minimum when the snows arrive.
The flies on the windowsill were poised as only the dead can be, somewhere out in the field, as seen from the window. Like it or not, your identity sticks to you like a moth to the door screen where it attached itself the night before. Never allow yourself to be photographed smiling triumphantly. That picture will illustrate your obituary. It was so hot, the birds' colors ran. More, the willows were demoralized. Worst of all, the clouds folded. The goldfinch shot across the garden party like the glass of champagne a woman jealously threw at her fleeing spouse. Consider the man whose chute didn't open, yet who lived by giving in to his end so completely that the earth refused to punish gentleness. If it happened to you, it happened only to you. If it happened to others, it didn't happen to you. If it didn't happen to you, it didn't happen. And now, with thanks to all of you for being here to listen, and thanks to the many who have made this dream, this book, this reading possible, I'll close with a poem that closes Lewis's book. One last thing. When my words are lost, twisted by wind devils, are puffed away like ash or dust, those words I wanted to leave an impression on the air with, and that I didn't, and that didn't make a dent. When the room pressing my images to make something of themselves is wreckage or worse, the house down, the city abandoned by those who've gone to the country and are never coming back. Then, if someone somewhere is still alive to the concentration of emotion in language, they may remember me. Not me, but my outline. not that, but the balanced distress of one who rose to the height of his downfall and was visible in words to himself. Thank you for helping us make Lewis visible, and have a good night.